Early in the morning, I'm doubled over with unbearable stomach pain, so I ask my wife Mandy Sanchez to drive me to the hospital. Downstairs, just as I reach for the passenger door, she presses her hand against it, stopping me before I can pull it open. The passenger seat is Sam's. No one else sits there, she declares. I just stare at her, wondering if I heard her right. I paid $300,000 for this car. And now she's telling me I can't ride shotgun because that seat is reserved for another man? Mandy pulls open the back door and shoves me inside. What difference does it make where you sit? Your stomach hurts, right? Let me just get you to the hospital. Somehow, the cramping in my gut doesn't feel as sharp anymore. No amount of physical pain can match the ache in my heart. The moment we pull up to the hospital, Mandy gets a call from her childhood best friend, Samuel Carter. She walks away, leaving me behind without a single backward glance. As I watch her go, I suddenly come to my senses. On the way back from the hospital, I was still sitting in the back seat. A faint trace of perfume drifted over from the passenger seat, where a new sign made from perler beads had been stuck. Reserved for extraordinary Sam. No bastards allowed. Mandy caught me staring at it and offered a guilty explanation. Sam can be childish sometimes. Don't take it personally. My voice went cold. He's 28, and he still gets to act like a kid? Does being childish give him the right to call me a bastard? Samuel Carter was Mandy's childhood best friend. He was 28, 2 months older than me. From the day I met Mandy, the two of them had been inseparable. Even our dates had always been a three-person affair. I'd naively believed that once we got married, they'd learn to respect boundaries, and Mandy's attention would slowly shift to me. But I was wrong. After the wedding, they didn't rein it in at all. They only got worse. Mandy's expression darkened. Don't make everything about you. Sam was just talking about whoever sits in the passenger seat. As long as you don't sit there, what's the problem? I bought this car, I shot back. Every inch of it belongs to me. Why shouldn't I be able to sit up front? What gives him the right to slap a sign on it and call it his reserved seat? Mandy frowned. It's just a sign. Do you really have to make a big deal out of something so small? I laughed in disbelief. It might be small to you, but it isn't to me. I ripped the sign off and threw it out the window. Mandy slammed on the brakes and snapped at me. Sam spent 4 hours making that by hand. How can you just throw away someone else's stuff? My expression stayed calm, but anger surged inside me. If it's his, tell him to keep it himself. I don't allow anyone else's stuff in my car. Mandy shoved the door open and got out. You're being completely unreasonable. Fine, take your car. If you're so capable, drive it home yourself. She walked into the middle of the road, picked up Samuel's perler bead sign, flagged down a taxi, and left. As I watched the taxi disappear from my sight, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. She knew perfectly well that I'd been in a car accident and was too traumatized to get behind the wheel again. Yet she still left me and the car stranded on the side of the road. With trembling hands, I called my best friend, Frank Quinn. Frank, help me draw up a divorce agreement. Frank heard the crack in my voice and knew something was wrong. What happened? Choking back tears, I told him what had just happened. When I finished, he immediately tried to comfort me. Liam, don't cry. Call a driver and come to my place first. We'll talk through the divorce and figure out how to protect your interests as much as possible. With Frank's reassurance, I slowly calmed down and called a driver to take over. I spent the afternoon at Frank's place going over the strategy for my divorce from Mandy. When we finished, I took a taxi back to my apartment complex. But when I stood at my front door and punched in the code, the keypad flashed an error. I tried it several more times. Nothing. It took me a long moment to realize Mandy had changed the passcode. I pulled out my phone and called her. Mandy, I'm locked out. Did you change the code? Mandy's voice was sharp and clear. Yeah, I did. I bought the apartment, so I get to decide whether you're allowed in. My heart sank. So she was getting back at me for what happened this morning. She had bought the apartment before we got married, and only her name was on the deed, but I'd chipped in $300,000 for the renovations. Thinking about what Frank and I had discussed this afternoon, I forced myself to swallow my anger. Mandy, what happened this morning was my fault. I'm sorry. Mandy snorted. Oh, so you finally admit you were wrong? But I'm not the one you should be apologizing to. You owe Sam an apology. It was my fault, I said, going along with it. I shouldn't have thrown his perler bead sign out the window. Why don't you invite him over tonight? I'll cook a big dinner to make it up to him. Mandy paused. Well, at least you're showing some remorse. I'll let it slide this time. But if it happens again, don't ever expect to set foot in my house. Mandy, don't worry, I promised quietly. There won't be a next time. Our marriage would be over soon enough anyway. There wouldn't be a next time. She gave me the new code, and I finally made it inside. The very first thing I did after getting inside was contact a home security company and arrange to have hidden cameras installed in every room. That evening, Mandy came home with Samuel. The second he walked in, He took his own pair of slippers from the entryway closet with practiced ease and changed into them. Then he flopped onto the couch, watching me bustle around the kitchen. Liam really knows his way around a kitchen, he said casually. Mandy, you're lucky to have a husband like him. Mandy spread blue cheese onto a cracker and held it up to his mouth. All right, hurry up and eat. Not everyone gets to spend all day slacking off and enjoying life like you. Samuel winked playfully and bit the cracker right out of her hand. I shut the kitchen door tight on instinct, trying to keep the pungent, funky smell of the blue cheese from drifting in. Mandy always remembered that Samuel loved blue cheese more than anything. Every time he came over, she bought it herself, spread it on crackers just the way he liked, and fed them to him by hand. Yet she could never remember that the smell of blue cheese turned my stomach. Or maybe she did, but just didn't care. Half an hour later, I brought out the dinner I'd made and set it on the table. Samuel suddenly looked up from his plate. Liam, isn't this supposed to be an apology dinner? Why don't you start by taking 3 penalty shots? I can't really drink, I replied quietly. I'll just toast with water. Samuel scoffed as I reached for the water glass. The fact that you can't hold your liquor is exactly what proves you're sincere. Who are you trying to fool with water? Mandy opened a bottle of whiskey and poured me a full glass. Sam's right. If you're apologizing, act like it. You're taking these 3 shots. The apology was just an excuse. I hadn't expected them to be this relentless, hell-bent on humiliating me. But I had to endure it for now. I gripped the glass, lifted it, and knocked it back in one gulp. But Samuel still wasn't satisfied. You haven't even said what you're apologizing for. Mandy glared at me too. Liam, what's wrong with you? Do you seriously need someone to teach you how to apologize properly? As I watched them tag team me, I forced the words out. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have thrown Samuel's perler bead sign out of the car. I choked down the next 2 shots. Samuel finally flashed a wide grin and slung an arm around Mandy's shoulders. I'm not that petty. Since you're apologizing so sincerely, of course I'll forgive you. But Mandy and I made a promise when we were kids. Her passenger seat belongs to me. Even marriage doesn't change that, so don't get jealous over nothing next time. The alcohol hit me hard, making my head heavy and sluggish until I could barely get the words out. I won't. Never again. Then I couldn't hold myself up any longer. I slumped backward and blacked out. When I woke up the next morning, I was lying on the couch, my whole body aching. Aside from the dining table cluttered with dirty dishes and leftover food, there was no sign of Mandy or Samuel. I dragged myself up, grabbed my phone, and opened the security app. I couldn't wait another second to watch the footage from after I passed out last night. On the screen, the moment Mandy and Samuel were sure I was completely passed out, they dropped the act. He wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her onto his lap. Mandy, you've been spending all your time with that loser these past few days, he muttered. Did you forget about me already? She looped her arms around his neck and pressed a kiss to his cheek. We just got married. If I didn't play along for a couple of days, he'd get suspicious. Don't worry, you're the only one I love, she coaxed. If you could have kids, I never would have married him just to get my parents off my back. Once I have a baby, I'll divorce him, and we can be together out in the open. He scoffed. Who knows if you really mean that? A suggestive smile spread across her face. If you don't believe me, I'll prove it. Since the wedding, I've only let Liam touch me once. He swept her up and carried her toward the bedroom. I even bought the bed you liked best, she purred. Come try it out with me. Before long, their clothes were scattered across the floor. The 2 of them tangled together on the bed, filling the recording with breathless, sickening moans. Numb, I turned off my phone. I had asked her once before, since she and Samuel were always joined at the hip. Why hadn't they just gotten together? Why make me her boyfriend? Every time the 3 of us went out on a date, I felt like the actual third wheel. Back then, she'd held me close, her voice full of gentle reproach. Sam and I grew up together. I've only ever seen him as a little brother. Stop imagining things. You're the only one I love. And I believed her sweet talk. I thought he was just a brother to her, that she loved me, and that she truly wanted to marry me. I thought that, at the very least, there was still a small place for me in her heart. Now, I finally knew she'd been lying to me from the very beginning. To her, I was nothing but a tool to give her a child. Once she was done using me, she'd kick me to the curb. My eyes burned as I called Frank. Frank, I got the video. Mandy's been committing marriage fraud this entire time. Frank lost it the second I finished telling him what was on it. That cheating snake. She's going to get exactly what's coming to her. He took a breath, switching into lawyer mode. Now that we have concrete proof of the affair, I'll draft the divorce papers immediately and help you fight her in court. No, I said, my voice dropping. Wait a little longer. Frank sounded confused. Wait for what? I want Mandy to feel what it's like to crash from pure joy straight into devastation, I said firmly. I hung up and wiped the lingering tears from the corners of my eyes. Something inside me went cold. Mandy, you were the one who played with my feelings first. Don't blame me for what happens next. For the next few days, I acted as if nothing were wrong, playing the doting husband as best I could. Then I handed her a rigged pregnancy test and asked her to take it. When the test showed 2 lines, she was ecstatic. She reached for her phone right away to call her parents back home and share the good news. I smiled and caught her arm. Mandy, your parents haven't visited us since the wedding. Why don't we invite them down for a few days and tell them in person? She praised me for being so thoughtful and called them that very night. The next day, Mandy's parents, Oscar Sanchez and Daisy Foster, arrived by train. To welcome them, Mandy booked a table at a hotel restaurant. At noon, when I arrived at the hotel with everything I'd prepared, I found Samuel already there, standing right next to Mandy. Mandy noticed my eyes lingering on him and quickly explained, "My parents haven't seen Sam in a long time either, so I invited him along." The corner of my mouth twitched into a smirk. Of course. He absolutely needs to be here for this. After all, he was one of the stars of the show I had planned for them. Once everyone was seated, Mandy raised her glass, radiating joy. "Mom, Dad, besides having you here for a visit, we actually have some incredible news to share. It's..." Before she could finish, I pulled out the divorce papers and slammed them onto the table. The white pages hit the embroidered tablecloth with a dull, heavy thud. The bold black title at the top of the cover page was unmistakable. Petition for dissolution of marriage and complaint for intentional fraud. The dining room went dead silent. Mandy's hand, which had been raised to toast her parents, froze in midair. Her mother, Daisy, dropped her fork onto her porcelain plate with a sharp, metallic clink. Oscar Sanchez, sitting at the head of the table in his tailored suit, frowned deeply, his thick eyebrows pulling together as he looked from the papers to me. "Liam," Oscar's voice boomed, heavy with authority. "What is the meaning of this joke?" We just sat down. "It's not a joke, Mr. Sanchez," I replied smoothly, picking up my napkin, wiping my fingers and setting it neatly beside my plate. "Mandy was about to tell you some wonderful news about a baby, but I think you should read the terms of our separation first." Mandy's face turned bright red, her initial shock morphing instantly into furious embarrassment. She snatched the papers off the table, crumbling the edges in her fist. "Liam, are you insane?" she hissed, leaning across the table, her eyes wide with rage. "My parents drove 3 hours to get here. How dare you pull a stunt like this right now? Pick these up and apologize to my father before you ruin lunch." Sitting beside her, Samuel scoffed loudly, crossing his arms over his chest. Classic Liam. Always throwing a tantrum when he doesn't get 100% of Mandy's attention. "Did you get jealous because I came along today, buddy? That's really pathetic, even for you." I didn't answer Samuel. I didn't even look at him. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a small black tablet and set it flat on the lazy Susan in the center of the table. I tapped the screen once. "Mandy told you she was pregnant," I said, looking directly at Oscar and Daisy. "She also told me a few days ago that she only married me to get a baby so you two would get off her back, after which she intended to divorce me and marry Samuel." Daisy gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "What?" "Liam, shut up," Mandy shrieked, reaching across the table to grab the tablet. Before her fingers could touch it, the dining room door swung open. Frank Quinn stepped inside, wearing a sharp gray suit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. He stepped smoothly between Mandy and the center table, resting his palm lightly over the tablet screen. "Do not touch the physical evidence, Mrs. Sanchez," Frank said, his voice dropping into the cold, clinical register of a seasoned trial lawyer. "Or I will have the bailiff add evidence tampering to your file." "Who the hell are you?" Samuel barked, standing up from his chair. "I am Frank Quinn, Mr. Scott's lead legal counsel," Frank replied, pulling a remote control from his pocket and aiming it at the wall-mounted 65-inch smart TV behind Oscar. The TV screen flickered, instantly displaying the crystal-clear, high-definition 4K footage from my bedroom hidden camera. The audio boomed through the private room's surround sound speakers. "Mandy, you've been spending all your time with that loser these past few days. Did you forget about me already?" Samuel's recorded voice echoed clearly across the room. On screen, Mandy was sitting on Samuel's lap, her arms wrapped around his neck, kissing his cheek with an eager, desperate hunger that she had never once shown me in our entire marriage. "We just got married," Mandy's recorded voice purred back. "If I didn't play along for a couple of days, he'd get suspicious. Don't worry, you're the only one I love. If you could have kids, I never would have married him just to get my parents off my back. I even bought the bed you liked best. Come try it out with me." The footage showed them tumbling onto the marital bed I had purchased, stripping off their clothes, their breathless, sickening moans filling the high-end hotel dining room. Oscar Sanchez's face went from pale to a dark, apoplectic purple. The wine glass In his hand shattered under his sudden, crushing grip, red liquid and sharp glass shards spraying across the white linen tablecloth. Daisy let out a ragged, horrified scream, covering her eyes. Mandy! My God! Mandy! Turn it off! Turn it off! Mandy screamed, her voice cracking as she threw herself at the TV, trying desperately to unplug the cables. Frank didn't move. He simply stood beside Oscar, handing the elder man a clean linen towel to wrap around his bleeding hand. The video is backed up on secure cloud servers, Mr. Sanchez, Frank said calmly. To Oscar, your daughter and Mr. Carter have been engaging in intentional spousal fraud, cohabitation in the marital home, and emotional abuse. Samuel was standing frozen beside his chair, his jaw hanging open, his face completely drained of color. The arrogant, smug smirk he had worn for years was wiped away, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror as he looked at Oscar's murderous glare. Uncle Oscar, listen to me, Samuel stammered, his hands trembling as he took a step back. It's not what it looks like. Liam framed us. He set us up. Framed you? Oscar roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandelier above. Stood up so fast his heavy oak chair crashed backward onto the floor. He framed you into jumping into my daughter's bed. He framed you into calling him a loser. In his own home. Oscar lunged across the table, his heavy, calloused hand flying through the air. Slap. The sound rang through the room like a gunshot. Samuel was knocked sideways, hitting the carpeted floor hard, blood spurting from his lip. Dad! Mandy shrieked, falling to her knees beside Samuel, trying to shield him with her body. Don't hit him. It was my idea. Ilove Sam. I've always loved him. You stupid, worthless girl. Daisy wept, tears streaming down her face as she pointed a shaking finger at Mandy. We gave you everything. We approved of Liam because he was honest, hardworking, and adored you. You used him like a dog. You brought this leech into your marriage. Mandy looked up at her parents, her eyes wild, her hair disheveled. She turned her tear-stained face toward me, sitting quietly at the end of the table, sipping a glass of warm water. Liam. She whimpered, crawling toward my chair, her fingers clutching at the hem of my trousers. Liam, please. I was wrong. I was confused. Some manipulated me. He told me he was lonely, he made me feel guilty. I don't want a divorce. Please tell my dad it was just a mistake. I looked down at her. 4 days ago, when I was doubled over in agony from stomach cramps, she had locked the passenger door of my own car, telling me I wasn't allowed to sit there because it belonged to extraordinary Sam. 3 days ago, she had forced 3 shots of liquor down my throat while I was recovering, laughing as I blacked out on the couch, before dragging her lover into my bed. I leaned down slightly, looking into her frantic, desperate eyes. Mandy, I said softly, my voice smooth and devoid of any heat. Did you forget? The pregnancy test was fake. You aren't carrying my baby. You aren't carrying anything at all. Mandy's eyes widened to the size of saucers. Her breathing hitched in her throat. You lied about the test? She whispered. I needed your parents here. I replied flatly, pulling my leg out of her grip. I needed witnesses for the court filings. And I wanted you to know what it feels like to fall from the top of the world straight into the dirt. I stood up, buttoning my coat. Frank stepped forward, opening his leather briefcase, dropping 2 formal summonses onto the table in front of Samuel and Mandy. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Frank announced, we have filed a civil lawsuit against Mandy Sanchez for recovery of $300,000 in premarital renovation funds, full forfeiture of the marital apartment, and $500,000 in punitive damages for intentional spousal fraud. Frank turned his sharp gaze to Samuel, who was still groveling on the floor. And for you, Mr. Carter, a secondary lawsuit for intentional interference with contractual relations, trespassing, and grand conversion regarding Mr. Scott's vehicle. The towing company has already impounded the car. The reserved for Sam sign has been submitted to the police department as evidence of personal harassment. My car? Samuel gasped, looking up from the floor. It was never your car, Samuel, I said, looking down at him with quiet, absolute contempt. You worked for minimum wage at a gym, living off Mandy's allowance, pretending to be a high-flying free spirit. Let's see how long your spirit stays free when the court freezes your bank accounts. Liam, you can't take the car. Mandy screamed, scrambling to her feet. I paid for the gas. I paid for the insurance. With the credit card linked to my joint business account, I corrected her smoothly, which was canceled 3 hours ago. Oscar Sanchez took a deep, shuddering breath, wiping the blood from his cut hand with a napkin. The elder businessman looked at his daughter with an expression of cold, profound disgust that made Mandy shrink back in horror. Oscar, Daisy whimpered, clutching her husband's arm. What do we do? What do we do? Oscar spat, turning his back on Mandy. We do nothing. This girl is no longer a daughter of the Sanchez family. Mandy froze. Dad, what are you saying? I am saying that if Liam sues you, you pay him yourself, Oscar said, his voice dropping into the freezing register he used for failed business partners. I will not spend 1 cent of my company's money to defend a whore and her parasite. Every allowance I set up for you is revoked as of today. Dad, no, you can't do that. Mandy shrieked, reaching for his coat. Oscar shooed her hand away as if she were a filthy insect. He walked over to me, his stern face filled with an immense, painful guilt. Liam, Oscar said, bowing his head slightly toward me, a gesture the proud man had never made in his entire life. I am sorry. I brought my family here to celebrate, but instead, my daughter brought you disgrace. My lawyers will not contest any of your financial claims. Whatever she owes you, she will pay, even if she has to sell the apartment. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez, I said politely. I appreciate your fairness. Let's go, Daisy, Oscar said coldly, walking toward the door without looking back once. Mom, Dad, don't leave me, please. Mandy wept, running after them into the corridor, but the private dining room doors slammed shut in her face. Inside the room, only 4 people remained: Frank, myself, Mandy, and Samuel. Mandy sat on the floor near the door, her high-end dress wrinkled and ruined, her hair matted with sweat and tears. She looked at Samuel, who was sitting near the table, clutching his bleeding lip, looking frantically at his phone. Sam, Mandy whimpered, reaching out her hand toward him. Sam, what do we do? My dad cut me off. My cards are frozen. What are we going to do about the lawsuit? Samuel looked at her. For 7 years, he had looked at Mandy as his private gold mine, a rich, naive woman who paid for his meals, bought his clothes, let him drive a $300,000 car, and gave him unconditional validation while her husband did all the work. Now, looking at her ruined face, her frozen accounts, and her father's total disownment, Samuel's expression didn't show love. It showed pure, unadulterated revulsion. What do we do? Samuel sneered, pulling his arm away from her touch. What the hell does this have to do with me, Mandy? You were the one who signed the marriage papers. You were the one who told me you'd handle your husband. Mandy blinked, her voice trembling. Sam, what are you talking about? I did all of this for you. I slept with him once just to get a baby, so we could be together. I never asked you to marry him, Samuel shouted, standing up and dusting off his jeans. You're the one who wanted a fancy wedding. You're the one who dragged me into your house. I was just hanging out with my childhood friend. How was I supposed to know your husband was a psychotic maniac who installs cameras in his own bedroom? Mandy stared at him, her brain short-circuiting. You said you loved me. You said if I divorced him, we'd be together out in the open. With what money? Samuel screamed, pointing an angry finger at her face. You don't have a job. Your dad just disowned you. You owe him $800,000 in damages. You think I'm going to spend my life paying off your lawsuits? Samuel turned on his heel, grabbing his jacket from the back of the chair, and sprinted toward the side exit of the dining room. Samuel, don't leave me. Mandy screamed, scrambling across the carpet, her fingers missing his shoe by an inch as the door clicked shut behind him. She lay on the floor of the private dining room, her breathless, hysterical sobs echoing off the high walls, entirely alone. I stood by the window, watching Samuel run out of the hotel lobby below, jumping into a cheap taxi, fleeing like a rat from a sinking ship. Frank walked over, setting his briefcase on the table. The police are waiting downstairs to take your formal statement regarding the spousal abuse and forced alcohol consumption, Frank said quietly. Are you ready, Liam? I took a deep, clean breath. The pain in my stomach was completely gone. The dull ache in my heart had turned into a solid, unshakable peace. I'm ready, I said. 2 months later, the High Court civil and family proceedings concluded with absolute efficiency. Faced with indisputable 4K video evidence, financial paper trails, and her own parents' refusal to provide legal support, Mandy Sanchez lost everything. The court ordered the immediate liquidation of her Southside apartment to satisfy my $300,000 renovation claim, and the court awarded damages for marital fraud. The $300,000 car was officially returned to my sole possession, and its title was transferred entirely to my name. After paying off her legal debts and court fines, Mandy was left with less than $2,000 to her name. Unable to afford her former luxury lifestyle, she was forced to move into a tiny, unheated basement room in the outer suburbs, taking a low-paying job as a cashier at a 24-hour convenience store. Her parents never spoke to her again. As for Samuel Carter, His attempt to flee failed miserably. Frank filed a secondary enforcement action against him for civil conspiracy and conversion. To avoid jail time for unpaid court judgments, Samuel was forced to surrender his private gym membership, sell his personal electronics, and take 2 manual labor jobs at the city docks, earning minimum wage to pay off his portion of the legal costs. His reputation as a free-spirited charm was completely destroyed. Everyone in their social circle knew him as the parasitic leech who had ruined a family and fled like a coward when the bill arrived. Spring arrived in the city. The afternoon sun was warm, pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new waterfront apartment. I sat at a wide wooden desk, reviewing the final blueprints for my architectural firm's new commercial expansion. My stomach was completely healed, my skin healthy, my mind clear and quiet. Frank walked in, setting 2 cups of fresh, hot coffee on the desk. Mandy's lawyer called my office an hour ago, Frank said, leaning against the desk with a faint smile. She's begging for a 3-month deferment on her final administrative court fees. She claims she can barely afford rent and instant noodles. I took a sip of my coffee, looking out at the glittering ocean in the distance. What did you tell him? I asked softly. I told him the law doesn't accept tears as currency, Frank replied smoothly. She has until the 15th to pay, or the court will issue an attachment order on her wages. I let out a quiet, genuine laugh. There was no hatred left in my heart. There was no lingering anger, no desire for further revenge. They had dug their own graves, and now they were simply sleeping in them. My phone chimed on the desk. It was an alert from the Vehicle Service Center. Mr. Scott, your vehicle maintenance is complete. The custom leather interior has been fully replaced and the old passenger seat fittings have been permanently removed and disposed of. I picked up the keys, tossing them lightly in my hand, feeling their smooth, cool weight. Frank, I smiled, standing up and grabbing my coat. Let's go for a drive. Where to? Frank asked, grabbing his jacket. I looked out at the vast, open highway stretching along the coast under the brilliant blue sky. Anywhere, I said, my voice steady, light, and completely free. The passenger seat is empty and the road is mine.